Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. We are with your life coach. It's Tom Marino, who is living the adrenalized life, and we want you to live the same exact way. Get you all juiced up, feel good about your life. And what we're going to talk about today, Tom, reminds me, remember Saturday Night Live? And I can't think of the character's name, but he would come on and say, "You look marvelous."
Oh, yeah, that was Steve Martin used to do it. I can't remember.
Ricardo's, I don't know, but yeah, it self-worth and self-confidence is what we're going to dig into today. And that's the first thing I thought of. It's just like, just somebody who just feels good about themselves or somebody else.
Absolutely. Self-worth and self-confidence really go hand in hand. And a lot of my clients, that are, solopreneurs, people who are building their own businesses, want to be entrepreneurs, want to be in that space, they struggle with that self-confidence, and oftentimes it comes out as imposter syndrome, right? Like, who am I to be able to do this? Like, who am I to give advice, or who am I to create this product, or who am I? And it really comes down to, where do you see your self-confidence and your self-worth, and what are you doing that's impacting the development of that, the improvement of that, the strength of that, right? Confidence really comes down to how much do you trust yourself, right? Your self-confidence is do you trust yourself or not? And, when you're growing up as a kid, if you're raised by parents who, question every decision you make and never allow you to move forward and do what you need to do on your own, you don't develop a lot of self-confidence. And I have a client like that was very much second guessed by her parents as a teenager and as a child, and now even as a grown adult, she's second guessed on her decisions, and it just hits at the core of her self-confidence.
How do you? Well, first of all, before we go into making that change, is there a difference between self-worth and self-confidence, or are they so interchangeable?
I think it's very much interchangeable, but part of worth is value, right? We always say, what is that worth? What is that worth to you? What is that really about? What are you worth? What do you feel you're worth? Do you have that self-worth? Do you feel worthy, right? And it's usually how you value yourself, right? How do people position themselves in terms of their value, right? I always say to clients, I go, listen, you determine your value. And you can let other people regard your value, but you have to be the one that determines your value. And your value is what makes you feel worthy, right? What impact you have on people, how you interact with people, what you do for other people, that demonstrates what your value is, right? And how you see your value, right? Like being a good friend, right? You often say, you're such a valuable friend to me. Your friendship is so valuable to me because it's something where if you lost it, it would be noticeable. And that's really what worth is about, is if you lose that, what would happen? And people struggle with their worth and their value because sometimes they frankly, they don't have the self-confidence and the self-trust to see themselves as worthy of something. And that's kind of where it crosses over and goes hand in hand.
It's so true. Let's say you have a business, you perform a service, and you have to put a number on that service, what you should charge people and what your worth is. And even if somebody says, yeah, you do fantastic work, or you hear, you have 10 people, you really, really do a great job. So many of us undervalue what we're worth because we don't have that confidence.
Absolutely. And I encounter that all the time with my clients, especially the newer business owner. I was having a conversation with an architect recently, and he's a great guy. I know him for a while now, and we were talking about what he does. And I said, tell me a little bit more about what specifically you do, because he's a very specialized architect. He focuses on the exterior and the roofs, right? And he has this niche of redesigning roofs so they don't leak. And I'm like, that is a very specialized thing that you do. And I'm like, wait a second, how much do you charge for that? That expertise is invaluable. The amount of money that you can save insurance companies and you can save home buyers and homeowners because of the way you design those things is your value is significant. Like, how much do you charge for that? And he goes, I charge this. I know I really should charge that, and it was a conversation around, like, charge what you know you're worth. And as a coach, even people ask me all the time, how can you charge what you charge? And I go, I'm going to change your life. I've written out, Steve, 101 benefits of working with me, right? There's 101 benefits of working with me as your coach. And I don't know how you could put any value on 101 benefits, but it's the changes that you're going to see happen. And that's where you have to have a sense of your self-worth and how you value yourself. Because you need to, if you're going to provide a service that someone is coming to for expertise, you can't be cheap, because then you get what you pay for, right?
Well, also people are going to look at you and say, oh, look at how cheap he is. Must not be good. Must
not be good. Exactly. So why would we do that any differently with our self-worth? Why would we depreciate our value when we are people who have tremendous skills, tremendous abilities, and we can change the world, and we can change the world for people? Allow yourself to see yourself that way.
Totally. And something, we're talking about a fixed price, monetary. Same thing in relationships. You're in a relationship with somebody who may not serve you, who is not worthy of you, that you think, I don't want to sound, big-headed, like, do better than that. But it's you have a certain self-worth, and maybe that's not meeting your worth in that relationship.
And that's an excellent point. A lot of times when people grow in relationships, we often say when people get divorced, they say they grew apart, right? People grew apart. But the point is you really didn't grow apart. You grew parallel to each other. You just grew differently, and you saw yourselves differently, and your experience of that growth changed you, right? And you see yourself differently. When you look in the mirror, you see yourself as a different person. And if you don't see the complementary aspects in your partner, if you don't see that they value the same things that you value, right? If you have a partner that depreciates themselves, right, that devalues themselves, why do you want to be with someone like that?
Right.
Well, if you have a high regard for yourself, if you see the value of your life, and you can't convince this person that you love, that you care about, that they are just as valuable because they have their own issues, it's very difficult for you to stay in that relationship, because you're literally elevating, you're moving ahead, you're escalating, you're going beyond them, and it could wind up holding you back, and then you wind up depreciating your value. Right. And then what happens is you wind up in a relationship where neither of you are really building each other up, encouraging each other to grow. You're staying stagnant, and you're staying stuck, and there's the dynamism has gone away. That dynamic feature, it's evaporated. And that's what I love about talking about self-worth, because it should fuel you, it should energize you, it should adrenalize you, right? But people call into question their self-worth a lot because of what they're allowing to influence them, and that's a big piece of what I see a lot of millennials struggle with. We have Instagram and Facebook and all these social media platforms, and people put out this stuff about themselves, and some of it's true, some of it's not, but how it comes across, how other people interpret it, speaks to their own self-worth and their own self-value.
We are getting instant feedback. Kelly is checking in from Dallas. And by the way, you can reach us, instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com. She says, I know I lack a lot of self-confidence, but I'm not sure how to build it. Can you offer any suggestions?
Well, how to build your self-confidence, really, it comes down to these three things, okay? Number one, you have to love yourself. You have to make a decision to love yourself. You have to see that you are everything that you're supposed to be at this moment. And if you want to be better, you want to do more, you want to feel better about yourself, you have to do it in love of self, okay? So decide to love yourself first. Second, don't judge yourself. Don't judge who you are so harshly. be kinder to yourself, forgive yourself more. I was talking to someone earlier today that is a very selfless person. He really gives a lot to other people, but he's becoming exhausted in that selflessness. And now it's time for self-care, but he feels like he's betraying himself and his self-confidence is starting to plummet. And I said to him, I said, don't judge yourself so harshly. Forgive yourself more easily. If you want to build self-confidence, you got to get rid of that judge. That judge has to go away. And you have to be more forgiving of self. And then the third thing is start to trust yourself more. Make decisions, follow through, trust that it's the right thing. And if something doesn't go the way you expect, learn from that. That's part of trusting yourself. Trusting yourself is not making a decision and failing at that decision. Trusting yourself is making that decision, maybe it not going the way it's supposed to go, but it allows you and how you respond to it to build the trust in yourself that you can overcome it.
And in those situations, I would imagine, I mean, this is going based on my experience, that if it didn't go the way you wanted it to, at least you made every effort to go with your I say go with your gut. And that's
right.
the inner. And anytime I've not gone with my gut, major mistakes have been made.
When you don't go with your gut, you are defying what is supposed to happen for you.
Yep.
Okay.
And it doesn't mean it's going to go the way you want, just like
correct. Right.
You know?
Listen, I follow my gut most of the time.
Yep.
Okay. There's very few times I let the brain and the heart make the decision. I really let the gut be my guide. And when I stray away from my gut and I make a decision without my gut, that's when conflict arises. Because what I believe is that the mind is the ego, right? The mind is where the ego lives. The gut is where the soul lives. Okay. And when we feel something in our gut, we're getting information from somewhere else, from a spiritual place. We're getting it from a different place. And that's giving us guidance. Now, the ego has the choice to choose to follow that guidance or not and make that decision. And when the soul and the ego are a little bit more interacting, then you can make that decision with your gut. But if you're so stubborn because the ego is so stubborn and you go with the decision of the mind, you're more likely going to learn a much harsher lesson. You're going to learn things a little bit more difficult. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't have happened that way. What it means is that that's the road you took to learning the lesson that you needed to learn.
So we're talking with Tom Marino, life coach, and you can find him at tommarino.com. Based on what you just said, Tom, how do you align your gut with your mind? How do you put the two of them closer together?
I think it's really trying to understand both. I think you have to take the time and the energy to say, my head is really saying I should do this. My gut is trying to say this. Give them both the attention that they deserve. I think when we ignore one or the other, that's when we make bigger mistakes and we learn the lesson much harsher and we learn it with more difficulty. But when we really take into account what each is saying, it helps us to better align with that. And then let it align with your heart. Let it align with what you value and what's important to you, right? Because when you create that value alignment of self, that gives you your self-worth, right? Because what we see is what we value in life is part of what defines our worth. Do you value independence or do you value codependence or do you value not independence, right? That's part of you understanding how you're going to determine your worth. If you feel independent and you want to be more independent, you're going to have a higher level of self-confidence, a higher level of self-worth.
These are great tips today. And I'm a big proponent of the gut, but I've always wondered why sometimes you don't go with your gut. And you're right, it's 100%. It's ego, because you're thinking what other people are going to think. Even though your core is saying, this is what you should be doing, your mind is going, well, if you do that, people are going to think this. And
right.
You got to kind of, I guess, balance the two out.
Right. Well, and that's where, Steve, the judge is present, right? The judge is present in the ego. the internal judge of self is present in that decision-making process, right? There's a huge difference between discerning and judging, right? We often hear ourselves judging ourselves when something not so great happens. We go, well, you're not worthy. You stink. You're not the greatest. You're not everything that you think you are. Well, that's judgment, right? Whereas if something doesn't go the way you expect it to go, you should say, okay, well, what role did I play in this? What role, always point the finger back at you, right? Whenever there's a fire blazing, what role did you play in that fire, right? And that's where discernment comes in, where you actually contemplate and take the accountability and look at yourself and say, okay, what role did I play in this decision that made it what it was? That's very different than judgment. And being able to discern is where you find the forgiveness of self. It's where you find the trust in self, and it's where ultimately you find the love of self. But in judgment, the other things go away. That forgiveness goes away, that love of self goes away, and that trust of self is well, you see, you can't trust yourself. You blew that one big time, buddy. Well, no, I can trust myself, because how I'm going to respond to it is what I'm really trusting. That no matter what, I can trust that I'm going to come out of it.
I think the key is being present, because then you realize
Absolutely
what you did. So you didn't go with your gut. Let's say you made another decision, didn't go exactly the way you wanted it to, but you know why? Because you didn't go with your gut. And why didn't you go with your gut? Because of this A, B, and C. Just
right.
being present, being aware of that.
Well, and that's what it's about. It's the presence, and that is a key point. The ego will create the fear that we often feel, okay, and experience, and the anxiety and the worry. And where does that come from? It comes from that future that hasn't even happened yet, right? Because in the present moment, there really is no fear. Do you have any fear right now? There's nothing to worry about right at this very moment. We're having a conversation, we're interacting. This is all we have, right? I'm not going to be worried about anything that's happening later. I'm not going to be concerned about anything, because all I have is right now.
If you live in the moment, you could very
Correct.
easily, we could sit here and say, I got, things going on later. I got to make a big decision. There's that, there's this.
Right. But when you're present in the moment, like I always say, it's like being in an interview. We have the ability in an interview to cut out all the distractions and focus on the people in the room and the people asking us the questions, because we're laser focused in that situation.
Sure.
That is probably one of the greatest examples of how you can help describe being present to someone. Because in that interview, the only thing that matters in that moment is the answer to the question that you're being asked, and the question that's being asked, and the people that are asking that question, and you that's responding. That's all. That's all you need. But would there be worry maybe that you can't answer that question? Well, then there is worry in that specific moment. But it's going to pass when you start to answer the question. It's going to subside when you answer that question, right? It's like anything that we stage fright, like getting ready for a performance, right? People will pace before, they'll get crazy. Sometimes they go to the bathroom a lot before they go on stage, right? Because it's part of their pre-performance. But once they get on the stage, it's all gone. All of that worry for what's going to happen. What happens when that turns out to be the greatest thing that happens? Right? Why worry about something that could potentially be the greatest thing that's going to happen? And that's where you have to live in the present moment. And if you worry about your confidence and you worry about your worth and you stress over that, think about all the things you're going to miss because you stressed over that.
Sure. Yep. Even in that moment, let's say you're on stage, let's say you have to, we're using that as an example. Let's say you have to read names or whatever, and you're like, I can't screw this name up. Make that a part of you. So what?
Right.
You messed up a name.
Yeah.
It's normal. It's human. I'm sorry. Let's go on to the next one.
Right.
Whatever it might be.
It's embracing the imperfect. I mean, if you really want to describe how to build your self-confidence, is embrace your imperfection. See that you are not perfect. See that you're not going to ever be perfect. That you're human, you're going to make mistakes. Embrace your mistakes. It was funny. I gave a speech about 6 weeks ago to a group of networkers, and I was giving a speech and somebody asked me a question, what books would you recommend, right? And I said, what would you recommend for the entrepreneur? What would you recommend for somebody that's trying to figure this out? And I rattled off 3 or 4 books that I recently read, right? Meanwhile, my own book was sitting on a table displayed. And they picked on me and they said, Tom, sell your book. This is a perfect opportunity. Like, it wasn't registering with me at that moment. And I felt like a bit of a fool at the time. But then yesterday at another event, I said, this reminds me of a guy who can't sell his own book. And everybody cracked up that was at that same event because they got it. And I laughed at myself. And I leaned to the guy next to me and said, if you can't laugh at yourself, you don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
You don't grow. And I think that's what builds self-confidence, is recognizing that you are not perfect. Embrace the imperfect, be able to laugh at yourself, be able to take yourself less seriously. That's how you can build self-confidence.
And you think about some of the most successful comedians, a lot of times they just beat on themselves. And
right.
That's funny because it's real.
Yes. Yeah. They pick on themselves. I mean, Tig Notaro does this all the time. She talks about her medical woes and how everything always happens to her. It's the basic premise of her comedy is her own physical ailments that plague her. Right? There's so many people that do that. And I mean, Robin Williams used to laugh at himself. Yeah. George Carlin, like all of the greats, the wisdom in being able to laugh at yourself and to not take yourself so seriously, that's self-confidence.
Yeah.
But it comes with embracing your imperfection. That's where it really comes from. If you can love yourself, judge yourself less, and trust yourself, you can laugh at yourself and you can embrace the imperfect.
The worst thing you can do is look in the mirror and say, oh, look at this. I've got that. I've got this. No, nobody's looking at that. You are.
Right. Exactly. We don't ever see what somebody else sees.
Yep.
We only see what we choose to see. So you can look in the mirror and you can choose to see a failure, or you can choose to see the greatest success of all time. That's your choice. Confidence is a choice. Worth is a choice. Anything that the mind can think and the mind can conceive can become reality. It's all possible because you conceived it, because you thought about it.
Truly.
And that's the bottom line. And the beliefs that you tell yourself, the beliefs that you have about yourself, that's what impacts your self-confidence and your self-worth. You have to believe what you want to believe about yourself. I was working on some content writing this morning with a coach of mine, and she said, did you ever realize the word belief has lie in it? L-I-E is right there. And we have to recognize what beliefs are actual beliefs and what beliefs are lie beliefs, where that lie is capitalized in the word belief. And the more that we lie to ourselves, the less confident and the less worthy we feel. But when we believe, and all the letters are capitalized in that believe, like in Ted Lasso, believe, right? When you believe, anything is possible. Anything is possible. But when you lack confidence and you lack worth, it's because you're believing the lie in your belief.
How do you know it's a lie? How do you identify that that's a lie? Or do you just forget about that and just take the belief, believe in what you can do, believe in the best of you?
You know what the great question is what's the truth? Is it true? Is it true? How does it manifest in your life? Is this belief true? And people go through a lot when, I see a lot of people struggle with beliefs when it comes to religions and what they think of the world, right? And how they were raised in whatever religious belief that they have. Mm-hmm. And, you're indoctrinated into religion with these belief systems, right? And you're told to have faith and believe in them based on blind faith. We have to have faith in ourselves first. And we have to choose what we believe. Beliefs aren't meant to be imposed. We have to choose what we believe. And it comes down to, if you think you're good looking and you have this belief that you're not, well, is it true? Who's going to determine that? Only you can really determine that.
Mm-hmm.
Only you can choose to believe that you look good, that you're good looking. You have to love yourself first.
I believe you're a great life coach.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
You get right down to the basics and make it very understandable. If somebody wants to work with you on anything, self-worth, self-confidence, moving their life forward, how do they do that?
They can reach out to me at tommarino.com or follow me on Instagram at tommarinocoaching. Just reach out, DM me at Tom Marino Coaching on Instagram is probably the fastest and easiest way. Just DM me, follow me, let me know how I can help you. I offer a complimentary call to everyone that reaches out, because it's important that if you want to work on yourself, that I'm able to help you with the work on yourself, and that you and I have to be a fit. We've got to be able to work together, because you have to be able to trust me in that process of guiding you to improving the things that you want to improve.
Yep. Believe it and it will be. And I know
Absolutely.
It's cliche, but you know what? It's been proven over and over again.
Absolutely, Steve.
Works. All right, Tom, thanks a lot. Have a great weekend and look forward to catching up again.
You too, my friend. Be well.
You too. Take care.
All right. Take care.
We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you can now listen live on the MyTuner Radio and online Radio Box apps for iOS, Android, and the Amazon App Store. Or check us out online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on onlineradiobox.com/US so you don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.